1500. Glyphs taught a Spaniard, and the book wrote anew. In winter, the scriptorium at Santa Maria de la Peña smelled of vellum, vinegar, and confession. A muleteer delivered a cedar chest sealed with pitch and crossed twine, the tag flaking, "From New Spain, by mercy of the sea." Inside lay a folded strip of deer skin, 15 palms long, painted on both sides. Tlaquilo, work in cinnabar and indigo, but banded here and there with tight Latin script. The abbot unfolded it across the refectory board. Where saints should have walked, serpents coiled. Where litanies should have marched, rivers braided through hills not drawn to please Europe. In the margin, in a hand that leaned like a man apologizing, the name appeared, Fernandus de Montoya, soldier, the year of our Lord 1500. A note followed, copied under instruction of a native priest who calls himself Maestro. The Codex argued with itself. Columns of Nahua Day signs, flint, rabbit, reed, marched as if to drums no monk could hear, while Montoya's Latin pushed between them like a soldier through a festival. He described a city without doors, whose streets are threads, a priest who sings maps, and gold that refuses names. The pigments, gathered from cochineal, malachite, and soot, shone where fingers had polished them smooth. Elsewhere the paint rose like scabbed memory. A string of obsidian mirrors sewn to the edge flashed the candles back as tiny moons. A strip of knotted fiber, un-Spanish, unreadable, was stitched along one fold like a prayer the page refused to translate. A bell rang for sext. The brothers crossed themselves against the artistry of confusion. In the margin, a later hand had added a warning in cramped humanist letters. Turn the pages only by night. The river runs in daylight. The abbot smiled at superstition and ordered the codex wrapped in linen. Yet when he turned to leave, the river's painted bend had shifted a finger's breadth, bringing a glyph of a ceiba tree nearer the drawn mouth of a cave. Of course it had not. Vellum curls, candles trick the eyes. The abbot touched the ceiba with a fingernail and found, to his annoyance, that the paint felt warm. Fernandus de Montoya arrived with a limp and a sailor's cough, younger than his script suggested and older than his bones would admit. In the infirmary, he told the story in pieces, offering facts as if they were coins. Shipped from Cadiz to Hispaniola in 1499. To the Gulf in a caravel that smelled of orange peel and pitch. Inland with 20 men and a friar who carried a grammar like a sword. We followed a river that turned as if listening. He wrote in the Codex's Latin gutters and were answered by drums we could not see. He named their scribe simply Maestro, a priest with a knife of obsidian and hands stained the color of bruised plums. The Maestro taught Montoya to read day signs with breath, not eyes. One does not point, the friar recorded sourly in his separate journal. One sings. At a clearing of cables, the Maestro unrolled his own book and laid a feather across a glyph. Wind rose. The feather crawled toward the west like a compass that preferred music. There, Montoya wrote, he showed us the road that cannot be walked unless it is sung. The Spaniards marched and grew fewer. Fever learned their names, and a catfish with a spine like a pike made a lesson of a careless boy. The Codex kept pace, its margin filling with measurements converted from songs. 3 songs to the Red Falls, 7 to the hill where rain stands still. Where maps should have offered mercy, the page offered grammar, a hand, a feather, a breath, a stone. Montoya's Latin bent toward Nahua syntax the way a reed leans toward a stronger wind. By the time they met the city, the friar's quill had begun to tremble. He confessed in a quieter line that fear had a taste in that country, iron and green, and that the maestro had smiled at it as at weather that could be waited out. The city was not large. It was exact. Streets crossed at angles that consoled geometry, yet every corner contained a small deceit. A notch, a shadow, a vein of mica whispering elsewhere. Houses had no doors because walls folded when sung. The maestro pressed his palm to a lintel and breathed a phrase that tasted of river clay and plaster softened like bread. In patios, bowls of water reflected constellations that were not in the sky. The bowls kept their own heavens, perhaps imported from a season the world had misplaced. Montoya's hand steadied. He drew the city as if apologizing to it. Neat blocks, a plaza with a stone that looked like a crouched cat, a stair whose steps changed number when counted aloud. He wrote of a chamber under the plaza where copper plates hung like moons and rang to the voice's shape. The plates agree or refuse, he noted, and the wall behind them ripples if convinced. It rippled. The wall opened. A treasury lay within, but not of coins. Shelves held other books. Skins folded like accordions. Bark dyed the color of rust. And a strip of cloth that carried diagrams of breath. A single chest stood apart, shut with a knot the maestro would not teach. It contains what cannot be owned, he said gently, a sentence the Spaniards were not built to hear. The friar crossed himself in both directions. Montoya wrote nothing for a line, and then, small. Gold refuses names, but hunger names itself. Outside, rain began without clouds, and the bowls of water corrected their constellations. Night rolled over the city like ink over a page. In the morning, the treasury had replaced itself with a blank room that smelled of copper and sleep. Montoya slept there once and dreamt in a language of steps. He woke with sand in his mouth and a measure of water he had not drunk. The maestro laughed softly and said that dreams keep their own accounts. They did not go. A soldier named Diego pried a tile from a wall to see if stars weighed less than clay, and the city answered by forgetting him. He remained in counts and burdens, in footprints and jokes, but not in faces. Only the Codex remembered him as a smudge where a glyph refused pigment. Montoya drew a line through the smudge and wrote, "Debt." Another man stole a copper plate and woke to find his tongue shaped for a language that would not pronounce his own name. He returned the plate and learned the alphabet of apology in a key that hurt to sing. At last, Montoya begged the maestro for release, and the priest of doors did what priests do when mercy and law must be balanced. He marked the Codex with a series of tiny knives. Cuts in the paint no eye would see, but a finger would learn. "This," he said, "is the road back if you must carry memory you did not earn. Do not speak it. Do not sell it. If you give it away, give it as night gives the stars, blindly to all." The friar, who had kept his own book with a hedge of Latin around each fir, frowned and said nothing useful. The Spaniards left under a sky that had decided to weigh less. Montoya walked first. The Codex rolled beneath his cloak. the knives in the paint warm as if remembering hands. At the river, he failed a test he had not known he was taking. He looked back. In the Codex, the city folded like a bird returning to egg. The bowls of water stilled. The constellations shut their eyes. On the bank, a small chest had followed them like a dog. It bore the knot the maestro would not teach. They tied it to a mule that did not deserve the burden and set out for the coast singing softly, so that the road would continue to exist. What happened after is written 3 times and never the same. In the Codex, Montoya's script thins as if the river drank ink. He writes of men fevered and speaking Nahua in their sleep, of a night when fireflies arranged themselves into an instruction he could not read, of the friar waking with both books in his lap and the sense that one had been chewing the other. He writes in the smallest letters the vellum will hold. To map a road is to teach it to leave. In the friar's surviving quaderno, the tale is cleaner: a theft by natives who were only men, a storm sent by God who needs no errands, the providential discovery of a portage which had been walked by generations. He accuses Montoya of sorcery by caution. The soldier refuses gold. He notes acidly, but hoards paper. The third account, scratched on a plank found years later under tar, says only, "We sang wrong." Somewhere near the mouth of a tributary, no chart bothers to name. The chest untied itself, for knots obey rules too, and drifted into a side channel. Men stumbled after it and found not the chest, but their own footprints returning to meet them. Hunger took its tithe. The Codex, protected by oil and stubbornness, learned to endure damp and returned the favor by eating the friar's quaderno, one edge at a time, leaving him with the comfortable lie of a complete story. Montoya, last besides 2 boys who did not yet know what they would become, turned the tiny knives with his fingers and felt them cool as law. He did not open the chest. The river kept it, and the river is temperate only with stones. On a sandbar that moved each season, he promised the river he would not return. The river, busy with silt and moon, did not promise anything back. Centuries later, the Codex surfaced where it should not, in a monastery wall spared by a fire that preferred older sins. Restorers in gloves unrolled the deer skin and found the river dry until the lights warmed it. Then pigment softened and the blue began to creep along its bed as if tide had returned. Infrared showed underdrawings that contradicted the surface. Buildings where jungle painted over them, doors where walls pretended. Under raking light, the tiny knife marks shone like constellations you are not supposed to notice. A strip of knotted fiber slipped its stitch and lay across a Seba glyph like a snake deciding which way time flows. A conservator noticed the Latin had begun to lean into Nahua again, even where there was none to provoke it. She set down her brush and turned the page. When she turned it back, the leaning had corrected, but the word spiral in a European hand had migrated 3 fingers to the left. "Drafts," said the archivist. "Stress curl," said the scientist. "Not possible," said the student who had counted the letters, because counting was how he kept fear in the polite part of the room. At night, the Codex glowed as old oil will, and the obsidian mirrors showed the ceiling beams warped into river reeds. A recorder left on the table captured nothing but the sound of paper relaxing and a distant rhythm like a breath held too long and then released. A page that had been blank developed under humidity, a faint field of dots that, when connected, drew the outline of a knot nobody in the room knew how to tie. On the back of the mounting board, in a brown, forgotten hand, a sentence: "Turn only at night. The river runs in day." The conservator smiled at the coincidence and locked the case. But the next morning the saber sat a finger nearer the painted cave, and the mirrors reflected a room in which no one was yet standing. Today, the Codex sits under glass, in a gallery that smells of linen and old varnish. Its river behaves when watched and wanders when it can. Guides tell the story safely. Contact, misreading, loss, the parable of greed punctuated by scholarship. Children nod earnestly at words that have never gone into the jungle. In a drawer nearby lies the friar's quaderno, edges chewed like shorelines. The label calls it complimentary. It is not. The Codex allows the quaderno to exist the way a cat allows a bell, and then only because bells amuse. Once a year, on an evening near the equinox, the museum dims its lights and aims a beam across the case at the angle suggested by an astronomer who had the humility to ask a singer about maps. The beam catches the obsidian so that 3 small moons appear on the ceiling, and the knives in the paint glitter like frost. The river blushes and, for a minute, flows uphill a finger's breadth. No alarm sounds. The docents practice silence. In Extremadura, a hill monastery keeps a cedar chest that is always empty and always smells of pitch. In Veracruz, fishermen tell of a chest that follows boats and asks nothing but consideration. In a town no map has needed, a plaza stone shivers when sung to, and in the margins of certain new atlases, printed by machines that never learn to listen, tiny errors replicate like fish. A road that circles twice, a river that curls back, a door drawn where none should be. The Codex teaches what all good books teach, that a page can be a hinge and a map can be a promise, and that the shortest road home is the one you sing for someone else. The glass keeps fingers off the paint. It does not keep the river from remembering the sea.